demonic angel. Today I'm going to talk about Homer's Odyssey. And the reason for that is it's the oldest account in literature. It's actually a full-length novel of necromancy. Now, necromancy is only maybe a chapter or two of Homer's Odyssey, but it's the oldest literary account we have of necromancy. So I did reread it. It's been a long time since I've read the other one, is the Iliad, and the reason that those are so great is because they're, I think, something like 8,000 years old now, and it really, they really are some of the most popular first published complete works, not just little snippets of information, but we have a full-length novel. And of course, at the dawn of writing, it's so exciting. At the dawn of writing, we have an account of necromancy. And I thought I'll talk about that on YouTube a little bit, because when we talk about necromancy, and I'm going to be doing some investigations of, well, I should say my psychic impressions and readings. I'm not going to have, professional paranormal equipment, because I'm kind of the psychic in the situation. But, I want to go into the art of necromancy, how do I practice it, what does it mean for me? But I wanted to share, that if you've ever read, if you like that kind of stuff, the antiquities, the classics, philosophy, then that does have that. Now, Odysseus, he's returned home from war, and he is concerned and wondering about his future. So he wants to find out, how is the next battle going to play out? And we know through many different, other reasons, that the ancient Greeks, like the oracle at Delphi, the oracle meaning like the seer, this was done for purposes of divination. Early in humanity, most likely it was this worship started as veneration, and at some point it, through the some of the obviously most primitive stuff was like divination with intestines and things like that, because it went from that veneration to, okay, how can I use this personally to benefit myself? Now, the ancient Greeks and Romans, there's a lot of times people would think that the dead know everything. But ancient Greeks and ancient Romans thought that they only knew specific things pertaining to them. So Odysseus, he teams up with Circe, a sorceress, and they conjure the dead. And they they actually have to conjure some of these other dead people to eventually get to the soldier they want to talk to. But they conjure a soldier because they want his specific information, because he was in battle, and that knowledge, that lifetime of knowledge he had, is what they want. And I think that I like their idea, because to me it reflects a contemporary necromancy pretty much, because it's not that a specific dead person knows everything, or really can, at least not in my line of thinking, can specifically tell the future, but that each lifetime, or each person, and of course there's not everybody at a cemetery is a ghost, a lot of people move on, but the people who stay behind, the shades as they call them, they have obviously some kind of earthly hang-up, but they also know a lot. They've lived this life, and that it just is really to know, like, that's the whole enchilada of being psychic and then working with the dead, is that you can get this information of this person's lifetime and figure out what made them happy, what made them sad, and then you can apply that in some way to your own life. And that's the real, like, treasure of necromancy. And that's basically reflected in the Odyssey, is that they're trying to, except they're really keen on the divination aspect, and that was obviously very common. So, in order to conjure the ghost of this soldier, that they have to, well, Odysseus kills an animal and prepares its blood in a chalice and mixes it with herbs, and then he lights a big fire, and it has to be at night, and it specifies in the Odyssey that it has to be at night and the fire has to be going on. So it's a very specific set of necromantic rites this early on, this many years ago. And it involves blood, and when he offers this chalice of blood, some of these other ghosts, shades, a lot of times Buddhism, a lot of other ancient cultures, they refer to the dead as shades. I mean, think of shadow people, and it really is a shadow of a person, a remnant in some way. So shade is a really good term to describe that anyway. Some of these other shades that are a little bit more earthbound, they're a little bit more, because the idea is that the soldier they're conjuring, I mean, he's in the underworld. And he even talks about, like, his life, how it's like when they do eventually talk to him, he's basically in hell, the underworld, but it's not like a Christian idea of hell. It's he spends his time contemplating his life, and so that's why he is available as a shade. But there's these other shades that are more desperate to talk to people, necromancers. So they kind of come in first, and they speak with Odysseus and Circe, because this blood literally gives them the energy to speak. And then eventually the other shades are able to connect them with the shade of the soldier, and they get this information. And after a long talk, he doesn't just give it to him, but after a long talk, he's able to get some divination about the battle. And then we kind of move on to the other chapters of the Odyssey that aren't necromancy. Wonderful read. It's not a dry read. I've read a lot of. I love Aleister Crowley, but man, are some of his works some dry reading. You would think it would be exciting, because it's Aleister Crowley, it's the beast, it's the legend. And then you sit down and you try to read one of his books, and it's not like that exhilarating that you're expecting. I mean, for me, I still like really dry, kind of boring stuff anyway. So that's why I like it, but it still makes me laugh. This isn't like this. This is even though it's a classic, it's a classic for a reason, and that's because it's very easy to read. A lot of it really relates to our lives anyway now. It's got rites of passage that we all understand. how when you travel, literally travel, you're also traveling somewhere in your psyche, your identity, and that's both a literal journey and then a psyche journey, if you will. And this book is kind of, like I mentioned, it's in kind of like the idea is chapters. But I really like classic philosophers and everything like that. So yeah, if you're just wondering where do descriptions of necromancy come from, and somebody just must have made that up a couple hundred years ago, or that it comes from the movies. Well, no, it really doesn't. It's one of the oldest things that people have done. I mean, since the dawn of humanity. And people, although people buried their dead, cavemen buried their dead, they still weren't, I mean, they weren't afraid of touching people, putting grave goods with them, making sure they were dressed, and a lot of the times not very far away from where people really lived, and they would visit, just like some cultures, they dig up their dead and bring them to the table. This is not quite that, but it's much more of a being close type of a feeling. People used to go for picnics in cemeteries all the time. It's just become more taboo in very, very recent years because, I mean, largely because of the Christian idea that demons and evil spirits wander cemeteries and they're just looking to inflict pain. Also, another reason is that psychologically, if you're confronted with death and in a cemetery, I think that it can be very overwhelming to people, and people would rather just not think about death, even though that's always the irony, is that by not thinking about exactly what that concept of death means to them, that they're really avoiding living in some way or integrating something very, very important. So that the best thing would be to think about that situation and put a name to it and make it less abstract. But people have to be ready, whatever, for that. Some people just never are. Anyway, I guess that's my little chat with you guys about Homer's Odyssey. And I'll talk to you guys later.